Well, let me start by thanking everyone for taking the time to be here today. You've probably seen our banners around the place and these green jumpers, which ESs have affectionately come to describe as being either nuclear or vomit green, depending on their preference. You've seen, no doubt, on the question that we're trying to ask this week is God dead? And I do want to take this opportunity to thank you for taking the time and being willing to investigate the question. Perhaps you're here from uncertainty, that is, you'd like to know. Perhaps you're here out of a desire, I guess, for him not to be. Regardless, I think it's just terrific that there's so many people here in a university of all places, a place dedicated to learning, that there are people who've chosen to ask the question, look for answers, and be here at lunchtime skipping a boring accounting lecture. So, is God dead? I want to say no, and I want to give you three reasons why. Firstly, because I think the world would be a worse place if it were so. Secondly, because most people in the world don't think so. And thirdly, because he is alive. Firstly, is God dead? Well, I certainly hope not. I do want to concede that there are a number of tough questions that God ought to answer. Some of them have been raised already helpfully for us by Ash. The suffering that takes place in this world, atrocities committed in the name of religion and in particular in the name of the Christian church, the advances of science, reason and technology in the last couple hundred years in particular. They are good questions to ask and they need answers. But my big argument today is that if there is no God and if there is nothing more than what we can see with our eyes, and if all you see is all you get, then actually we're worse off. See, if that were the case, how would you conduct yourself in this world? How would you be a good citizen in this place that we call home? In a world where might is right, and what matters is looking out for number one and getting your own way, you better hope, and I was going to say pray, but not really much point if you don't believe in this, so you just better hope that you are stronger and better at getting what you want before everyone else does. If there is no God, and if he has no relevance, how do you define what is right and wrong? How do you define morality for your life? Some will say, well, surely all people are inherently good, or at least capable of good. That certainly, I think, is a matter for debate, because it seems to me that for every Mother Teresa, there's a Robert Mugabe. If there is no God, then ultimately there is no holding to account for the way in which you live, and more importantly, for the way in which the person who harms you lives. The Crusades have been mentioned, and I do want to say at this point there is no excuse for what was done in the name of God and in the name of the Church. Although, I do want to point out that atrocities committed in the name of God are not necessarily a reason against the existence or relevance of God, any more than you failing an exam is necessarily a slur against your lecturers. It might just be that they taught you badly, or as seems to be the case, they don't speak any English, or perhaps you just didn't do any study. If there is no God, then what the Crusaders did is nothing more than a fact of history. It's not a crime that deserves to be punished, or more importantly, that ever will be. If there is no God, the Crusaders got away with it. If God is dead, the world would not be a better place. In fact, my argument is that we'd be worse off. Secondly, is God dead? No, because most people in the world don't think so. 99% of people in the history of the world have believed that there is more than just the physical and the material. That is, that there is a spiritual dimension to our existence. Because otherwise, life is nothing more than just waking, eating, sleeping each day and counting down the number of sleeps until it's all over. It's entirely possible that most people in the world have been wrong. It's also entirely possible that we've been victims of a massive conspiracy theory, seen unlike any that's seen before. I listened the other day on the radio to, and we love conspiracy theories, so I listened the other day on the radio to a fellow called Edgar Mitchell. I don't know if you heard this story. He's the 6th man to walk on the moon. So, you know, a genuine astronaut, I guess. He said on the radio to BBC how aliens have visited this Earth and that the US government has been covering it up for 60 years. And the incredulity from the interviewer just thought he was pulling his leg, but this guy genuinely believed it. And there's something about that in all of us, isn't it? We'd love to think that it's all just been a conspiracy, and we'd love to find a conspiracy in this all. I'm not saying that because most people in the history of the world have thought that there is a God and that he's relevant means that it's true, but that innate sense that there is more, that gut feel, that dare I put it in any other terms, that vibe, that there is something more than what we just see. That's part of who we are as human beings. And although feeling it to be so doesn't make it so, the fact that for the history of the world, the people of the world, well, they've not been debating whether or not God exists or whether he is relevant, but how you relate to him and what he is like. Is God dead? Well, the world would be a worse place if it was so. Most people in the world haven't thought so. And thirdly, what I want to say is that I think there's evidence that he's alive. Let me ask you a question. What would it take for you to believe that God was alive and not dead? Intervene miraculously in this world? Maybe get his hands dirty, come and live amongst us, see what it's like to be a human, and show us by his example what it means to live a life of peace and goodwill to all people. Maybe for him to promise that he would right the wrongs of the past, particularly the ones done against me, and see justice done and people held to account for the way in which they have lived. What I want to say today is that Jesus of Nazareth claimed to do all that. He lived on this earth in Palestine some 2,000 years ago. In fact, we measure the timing of our lives with reference to his birth 2,008 years ago. He claimed that he was God. And the ultimate proof of his claim was, ironically, given the topic of this debate, that after his enemies put him to death for his claims, that 3 days later he rose again. His big claim was that soon enough he'll put an end to the injustice and suffering of this world, and that he will make everything good and whole and new and the way it was meant to be and the way in which we all long for it to be. This week at ES, what we are asking you to do is to be open to the possibility that perhaps this Jesus is alive and that God is not dead. What do you have to lose? Assume Jesus is alive but actually is dead. Then, even if you live the way he said to, do all those things, well, at worst you'll be a good citizen and you'll be a good person to get to know. If you assume he's dead when he's not, then you've made a terrible mistake. And you have no hope for the future. Thank you, Hannah.